The episode begins in Miss Cheerilee's classroom where the kids are being given a special announcement from Miss Harshwinny? Oh my goodness, they're actually doing it! They're following up games ponies play! Only instead of skipping right to the Equestria games, they're taking time to build up to it. And oh my god, what's wrong with your face? In this case, the children are being invited to the Crystal Empire to compete in a competition to see who will carry Ponyville's flag at the game's opening ceremony. And to help them get ready, Rainbow Dash is volunteering to coach them. This actually makes a lot of sense considering how enthusiastic she was about the games back in Season 3, and we even learned that she carried the flag for Cloudsdale back when she was younger, which leads to her getting carried away and having a long argument with Miss Harshwinny about behaving professionally. Hey lady, seriously, what the heck is wrong with your face? Also, is it wrong of me to call this episode for Dash Winnie? I mean, it hardly seems fair since we've already had Twidash, Flutterdash, Apple Dash, Raredash, and Daring Dash. You know what? I take it back. I'm calling Season 4 for Rainbow Dash with everyone. She ships with the entire season. Anyway, the Cutie Mark Crusaders decide to try out, and we get our first song of the season, which is pretty decent. I'll admit it's not my favorite song, but as Season 1 go, it's definitely better than the Failure song from Season 3, and I think it might even be a little better than the Find a Pet song from Season 2. The song even has a really clever reference to Rocky during the Crusaders training montage. Now, obviously the joke is that Scootaloo is having a tough time climbing these steps even though there are only 3 of them. But as it turns out, in real life, the steps that Rocky runs up before striking his iconic victory pose aren't actually all that difficult to climb anyway. So I don't know, I just think that gives the scene a bit of added meaning. But then Diamond, Tiara, and Silver Spoon show up to make fun of the Crusaders, saying they'll never win. And considering how things went the last time they entered a competition together, there might be some truth to that. The bullies make their usual blank flank remarks, saying that you have to have a cutie mark to represent the town. And they just give each other genital warts. But in a surprising moment of clarity, the Crusaders say that Miss Harshwinny never even mentioned cutie marks as a requirement. They show their routine to Rainbow Dash, and everyone is super impressed, even though Rainbow pretends not to be. You know, Rainbow, as a professional, you can be excited about something just without doing flips off the ceiling. I actually kinda like this development for Rainbow Dash, but the whole acting professional thing gets dragged out so long I'm surprised that no one tries to correct her at any point. It ends up feeling awkward. Diamond, Tiara, and Silver Spoon get worried that the Crusaders might win, and since the blank flank comments don't work anymore, they start looking for other ways to get to them. And didn't I say this is how bullying works back in my review of One Bad Apple? So in just a few lines of dialogue, this one scene has more to say about bullying than that entire episode. This time they target Scootaloo, saying that she would never be able to represent the town's Pegasi when she can't even fly. So yes, we finally get solid confirmation that Scootaloo can't fly, and this is very unusual for someone her age, as if answering all the fans who cried bullshit when Pound Cake flew during Baby Cakes. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle, in another moment of clarity, say that it doesn't matter and everyone already likes the routine just the way it is. But clearly this really bothers Scootaloo, and she starts becoming convinced that they should change the act. In fact, it isn't even about the act anymore, she becomes obsessed with getting her wings to work just so she can prove her worth as a member of her own damn species. And to put this in perspective, remember how Fluttershy was treated when she was a kid, and how that affected her even as an adult. And hell, at least Fluttershy could fly, she just wasn't terribly great at it. Plus, she was more interested in what was happening on the ground anyway. Now imagine a Pegasus who's even weaker at flying than Fluttershy, but with Rainbow Dash's competitive attitude. This kind of thing must be devastating to her. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if she could only cope with this because her Ponyville friends normally don't say anything about it. Unfortunately, there were only a couple of days before the competition, and even if Scootaloo does learn to fly, it won't happen by then. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle get tired and frustrated and eventually decide to go on without her. But once Rainbow Dash finds out, it's honorary big sister to the rescue! Fuck yes, best Dash moment! We cut to Scootaloo in her room. Holy cow, she actually does live in a house. I mean, we still haven't seen her parents yet, but it's a start. She tears down all of her posters and even throws out her scooter before Rainbow Dash comes in. That's when Aang tells Tenzin, "You're already awesome and you don't need to be like me." Oh fuck, that's the wrong show. Anyway, in yet another surprisingly mature moment, Rainbow admits that she has no idea if Scootaloo's wings will ever grow in properly, but regardless, that isn't what defines her. And so, with her friends in tow and her little buzzy wings buzzing, she rides her scooter all the way to the Crystal Empire and wins the competition. What have you done lately? Rainbow Dash is still putting on her professional face, but oh, here's the payoff to that joke. Miss Harshwinny gets excited and says it's the most impressive thing she's ever seen. Really? I mean, it's a nice routine and all, but she's the head of the Equestria Games. Doesn't she judge this kind of stuff all the time for a living? If this is the single most impressive thing she's ever seen, that it even gets this kind of reaction out of her, then how fucking dull is her life? What's wrong with your face? And now everyone's like, yeah, we won! Yeah, you guys are awesome! Do we get cutie marks now? Oh, fuck my life, this shit again. It's funny because Rainbow Dash is the reason they act like that in the first place. I do think it's kind of weird that we never get to see the other performances, but perhaps it's for the best that it's left to the imagination. Seriously, if the Crusaders clearly just blew away the competition, do you really want to find out how painfully mediocre everyone else was? Now, ultimately, there's a lot going on in this episode. The main issue on display is one that we always kinda knew was there, but given the usual standards of the show, it was doubtful that it would ever be given any direct attention. But this episode does a surprisingly good job with it. We learn here that Scootaloo is arguably the strongest of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, but she also has to deal with the most pain. And I love the follow-up to Sleepless in Ponyville as we finally get to see Rainbow Dash act like the big sister that she promised she was going to be. Oh, that was such a good scene! Obviously, with the competition coming up so soon, events had to be moved along and resolved quickly while keeping the shifting emotional tone believable. And I think it works for the most part, but it also feels like they could explore this topic even more, perhaps in a future episode. Otherwise, my main problem here is that a lot of the humor falls flat, though frankly, it is kind of a big deal when nearly every joke brings the entire episode to a screeching halt. In fact, that's been my problem with every episode this season so far, except for Castlemania, which basically needed to have a good sense of humor because it was the only thing that episode had going for it in the first place. Every other episode that tries to be mature or make a point falls apart when it tries to be funny, and that's a real shame because, again, Castlemania proves that the show can still do comedy very effectively. But anyway, if you can get past that, this episode has a lot of good stuff going for it. Flight to the Finish gets a 7 out of 10.